Here we go.
And here we go. And hi, Greg.
Hello, Maya. So good to be here.
Hi, everybody out there. And welcome to another episode of The Wild Ways. And today, oh my God, we're going to talk about one of my most beloved plant friend and ally, one of the most potent master plants also, and one of the most misunderstood in society. Today, we're here to talk about tobacco. And for tobacco, I wanted somebody who had met tobacco ceremonially and understand it as a plant medicine. And I'm so grateful Greg stepped forward, and I can't think of a better person than you, honestly. Yeah, Greg has been studying to be a tabaquero for a couple of years now, right? And
Training for the last year and a half, 2 years.
but you're also a breathwork facilitator, a ceremonialist. You run retreats and trainings, and you help people heal. And so I was reading Greg's story actually started with this. It was fatal, right? What you had.
Not explicitly fatal, but what I had was ulcerative colitis, and that came on in 2014, kind of out of the blue.
Yeah.
And the way that allopathic medicine approaches it is there's nothing you can do about it. You just take your pills and it will likely just keep getting worse as your life goes on. And so just get used to it was what doctors told me. And that sent me on this huge journey of healing where I really had to self-resource the strength and the energy to heal. And of course was supported by family and people in my life at the time, but it really took a lot of inner strength to be able to find the drive to keep moving forward because it is such a debilitating disease. So that led me to exploring nutrition and very, very clean diet. And eventually it led me to cannabis oil. And so that's where my first real introduction with plant medicine came, was 3 months of eating cannabis oil that I was making myself. And by the end of those 3 months, I'd completely healed the ulcerative colitis. And that launched me on this trajectory of working with these sacred plant healers without necessarily realizing it at the time, because that cannabis oil treatment was about 9 years ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's been a wild journey of deepening into this path over those 9 years, and just realizing that the plants have been calling me to work with them for a long time.
And what you're studying is straight from the shamanic tradition of the Amazonia, right?
Yeah, what I'm currently studying is I'm studying with Mapacho, the Amazonian tobacco that they hold as sacred and they use in ceremonies. And so my teacher, Jordan Mockingbird, who I've been studying under for the better part of the last 2 years, trained with the tabaqueros down in Peru in the Amazon and the Andes. So deeply steeped in the Amazonian traditions and then blended with the Amazonian tradition of tree diets and master plant diets as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in addition to studying with tobacco, the trees that my teacher works with are the oak, the birch, and the metasequoia. So studying with those 3 trees, and then tobacco as kind of the anchor points of all of it.
Before we begin, we need a little bit of common vocabulary. So, first of all, what is a tabaquero, and who is Mapacho?
Yeah, these are both good questions. So a tabaquero is somebody who works with tobacco for the purposes of healing, somebody who's connected with the spirit of tobacco and is able to channel that energy into a space or just work with that energy for the purposes of healing and self-mastery. It's a very ancient Amazonian tradition, and oftentimes ayahuasqueros, people who work with ayahuasca, shamans who work with ayahuasca, in the original traditions, I don't know how many of the tribes still follow this, but in some of the original traditions, before somebody was ever working with ayahuasca, the shaman of the tribe would see them as a kid, usually around like 6 to 8 years old, would recognize them as the next shaman, and would begin their training at that age of like 8 years old. And then for a period of 5 or 6 years, they would only work with tobacco.
Oh, wow.
And so they would get to know tobacco inside and out. And then at that point, once they had a mastery of tobacco or a very, very strong connection with the spirit of tobacco, at that point, they would then begin their training as an ayahuasquero. But tobacco was the original medicine of the Amazon.
And is that because a friend a long time ago told me going to ayahuasca without Mapacho would be like going into battle without a sword, which made no sense to me because I had such a loving relationship with Aya, and I didn't understand. But is that why they have to study tobacco first?
I'm not sure if that's why they study tobacco first, but if we look at the energetics of both ayahuasca and tobacco, ayahuasca is this powerful feminine energy. That's usually how she's depicted. And so she can bring the storm, she can bring the beauty, she can bring whatever is needed to be the catalyst for the healing or the change. But it can show up in any number of ways, and you're kind of just along for the ride for the most part. And the whole thing is about surrendering. And where tobacco comes in is tobacco is the masculine counterpart. In some areas of the Amazon, they say that tobacco is the grandfather of ayahuasca because tobacco is who taught the tribes about ayahuasca. And tobacco's energy, being that masculine counterpart, is very straight and very direct. And so when shamans are smoking mapacho in an ayahuasca ceremony, oftentimes the way that it was described to me is it helps them see the truth through the dancing visions of the ayahuasca. And it helps them cut straight into the truth of what's actually going on with an individual.
That makes so much sense. And so Mapacho, how is Mapacho different than other tobaccos?
Yeah, so when people think of tobacco, they usually think of the cigarette tobacco, which is Virginia tobacco, which is a much lighter, kind of like golden color, much lighter in its potency too. And then Mapacho is Nicotiana rustica, which is a species that grows specifically in the Amazon, and it's very potent, very dark color. And so when people who, in my experience, when people who smoke cigarettes smoke a Mapacho, which is the Amazonian tobacco cured in a traditional way, in the ways that they've done it for thousands of years in the jungle, when they smoke a Mapacho, they're like, oh my God, this is so strong. And it's almost too strong for them because they're used to smoking cigarettes, which are Virginia tobacco, but then also laced with other chemicals and additives and things like that. So the Mapacho is, as far as I'm aware, it's the Amazonian tobacco after it's been cured and prepared in a certain way.
So when you study to be a tabaquero, you're not only smoking it, right?
No, there's many different ways to work with tobacco. Smoking it is probably the most common way that people can relate to it. But in my training with Jordan Mockingbird, we're primarily eating it. And so we cook the tobacco down into a thick paste. And then from that paste, we're either eating it and letting it sit in the mouth and digesting it through the body, which is probably its most medicinal form.
Like you eat it, like you swallow it.
Yeah,
Wow.
like we're eating it. Yeah. And then there's also tobacco ceremonies. So that's just using a larger amount of paste and then mixing it with warm water and then drinking that to induce the purge. Very similar to how ayahuasca works with purging the body and cleansing the body. Tobacco can do very much the same thing. And then there's also Singada, which is basically a room temperature steep of tobacco just mixing the tobacco with a little bit of garlic and then water and letting it sit in the sun for a day. And then you take that and you basically do a nasal flush with the tobacco. So you're sniffing it through the nasal cavity, bringing it through the sinuses, and then spitting it out the mouth. And it's super, super cleansing for all of the sinuses. It gives a lot of clarity of vision, both metaphorically and physically. So oftentimes you'll literally see colors brighter after a Singada. Yeah, it's amazing. I love Singadas. And then, yeah, primarily we're eating it. And then when we smoke tobacco, it's usually to connect either to the spirit of tobacco, connect to one of the trees that we're working with in a diet, or just to offer prayers up.
How do you learn? I mean, I can't imagine. I would not know how to consciously circulate something through my sinuses. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that naturally happens because when I first did it,
It just
I had
happened.
before. It's like the body knows how to do it, and those channels, the sinus channels, you just keep sniffing and it just keeps bringing it through the sinuses and eventually out the mouth.
I think I asked you that when we first talk about working with Hapeh. That's not part of your training at all.
Not for this particular training. I have a relationship with Hapé that's many years old. That was my first introduction to tobacco. I have a lot of respect for Hapé. I love Hapé.
We probably should say what Hapeh is.
Yeah. So Hapé is the Mapacho tobacco, usually ground up, and then it's oftentimes mixed with different flowers or different plants from the jungle to give different energetic properties. And then it's taken as a snuff. So usually there's a curipe. I might have one actually right beside me. Yeah, so usually a curipe, so a self-applicator, where you put one end in the nostril, one end in the mouth, you blow like that. Or if you're serving another or you're being served, usually it's a tepe, which is like a longer one that one person, usually the shaman, will put in their mouth, the other person puts it in their nostril, and then you blow that tobacco snuff into the nostril. And that, it can be quite intense. I know for me, that was my first introduction to Mapacho. And probably for the first 6 months of working with Hapé, I would purge pretty much every single time for many hours.
Wow. And you were self-applicating?
Yeah.
Wow.
Other than a few times, I was served by the Yawanawa in a ceremony and purged for like 8 hours after that.
Oh my God. Whoa.
So it was super intense for me, but it kept calling me back for whatever reason. So I was like, okay.
That's interesting. I used to have a happy practice and I
Mhm.
left for India specifically without it. And it was funny because it kept finding me, even though I left it behind. It was like when I left Costa Rica, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop working with Hapeh. And I was literally gifted a whole jar. And I was like, all right, thanks. And it was the same in India. And so this morning, for the first time in 6 months, in honor of our conversation, I wanted to reconnect with tobacco. And it's very light for me. I just sneeze. And I remember at the beginning, it would be like the sense of mint peace is the best I can describe it. It would just clear my field.
Mm.
But I think I'm shy by myself to take too much.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a very intelligent medicine. So like, I know the reason for me in hindsight, why I was purging so much. It eventually, the more that I sat with it, it began to show me and kind of attune me to my own nervous system state. And I would purge because I would find myself in my head, and then there would be fear about purging because it was happening. And so I would literally feel myself start to wobble like this, and then the purge would come. And it was because I was so in my head. You can think of it almost like those clowns that are top heavy that you punch and they just like do this.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. And the Hapé taught me to bring it all down to my sacral and my base, my root, and to bring my energy and focus it down to there. And when I would do that, the wobbling would stop. And over time of just like coming back to that practice and that visualization and like bringing my focus down into those lower centers, I found I was able to ground all of that energy that Hapeh was awakening within me. And then once I was able to ground it, then I could begin to work with that energy. And so for me, Hapeh was very clarifying and showing me where my nervous system state was at the time and how ungrounded I actually was at the time, and gave me the experiences that I needed in order to find a way to deeply ground myself with the medicine. And then the deeper that you go into it, you know, the less you need the medicine because it just becomes a way of being at that point.
I hear you. So do you think that was a precursor? You needed to have your system so grounded in order to continue your study with tobacco in another form?
Yeah, it wasn't so much a conscious transition. It was Hapeh was in my life for probably 5 years of working with it pretty much every day. And when I started doing my first plant diets, they were in the jungle, and was using Hapeh during those diets. And those diets were also working with ayahuasca. So I didn't really have a firm grasp of what I was stepping into at the time when I began to work with plants. All I knew is that I was being called to work with plants in this way, and very clear messages to go diet. And in the course of me dieting, I came across an oak diet. I just saw a post on Instagram, and as soon as I saw it, my whole body lit up, and I had the full body chills and everything like that. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I know I have to be there. And that ended up being the first tree diet that I did with my now teacher, Jordan Mockingbird, and my first time working with tobacco in that way. And it just, compared to my diets with ayahuasca, working with tobacco instead of ayahuasca in the diet setting completely changed my understanding of what these diets actually are, because the medicine and the messages that were being delivered were every bit as potent as if it was with ayahuasca, but I was never leaving my normal state of consciousness with the tobacco. And so I found that it was much more accessible to actually ground and integrate the messages and the lessons and the teachings that were coming. And yeah, I had no intention of training with tobacco, and beginning to follow this path, it found me.
So some people go to ayahuasca for ayahuasca, but ayahuasca can also be the plant that lets you communicate with another master plant. And so what you're describing is using tobacco as the bridge plant. And so you have, in your case, it was an oak diet, and tobacco was that bridge that lets you talk to oak. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
so you can have a ayahuasca ceremony for the purpose of talking with tobacco, but you can also have tobacco for the purpose of talking with oak or any other plant.
yeah, with any plant. And like ayahuasca will open up those channels to talk with other plants as well. It's like ayahuasca oftentimes is very intense and very big for people. It kind of like blows the doors wide open. Tobacco works in a very different way, where it's very subtle. And so it asks you to slow down to find that opening and tune into the subtleties in the body, which in my experience is much more, I guess, much more juicy in the long.
Because it works so fine.
Yeah, and it's like so little attunements and shifts.
And is it easier to integrate in this case because you are completely in this reality as you're having your experience with the plant?
Yeah, that's been my experience. It's been much smoother integration process. I won't say easier, but smoother. Because when I've dieted with ayahuasca, it's profound what I receive. And then sometimes it's multiple years before I'm able to actually ground any of it, because it's so up here in the astral planes. Whereas tobacco, it's like the entire thing is taking place in the body.
Mm.
And so, yeah, it just feels like a very different approach where it's all happening on the subtle energetic levels in the body. And so there's nowhere else to go other than in the body.
So when you work with tobacco, what does he feel like? It's a he, right? Can I?
Typically, that's how people experience tobacco, is like a strong masculine energy or almost like a grandfather energy. A lot of people will refer to tobacco as abuelo or grandfather.
Mm. So does he have a personality where every time you work with tobacco, he always feels the same? It's like this one being that comes and visits you and you recognize this energetic signature. Or is it more like the need of the moment, tobacco will adapt?
Yeah, I would say it's more the second one, the need of the moment, and tobacco will adapt, because tobacco has, all in all, tobacco is very steady and very consistent, and almost like a grandfather who's teaching lessons, he can get a little playful, or he can be a little trickster sometimes, or he can just deliver it straight, or he can deliver it very firm or very lovingly and very playful. So he can show up in a lot of different ways, and it kind of depends on what it is that the individual is needing at that moment. And the wisdom of the plants, not just tobacco, but all the plants, is that when you begin to work with plants in a shamanic way, they tune into your biofield and your specific energetic signature, and discern exactly how to deliver the medicine and the messages that you need to receive, and in what way it would be best received. So a lot of people, when they think of a plant diet, they think of ayahuasca diets, which are very common nowadays, and ayahuasca opening those channels of communication. But tobacco is every bit as effective, if not more so, because all organic biological life contains nicotinic receptors. And so all organic biological life is designed to work with the medicine of nicotine or the medicine of tobacco in some way. And so the ancients, when they were working with tobacco as their medicine, they knew that tobacco was the connector. The way that my teacher describes it is like tobacco is kind of like the holder of the web of life.
Mm.
Through the web, you can connect to any piece of life. And
That
so
is,
with the nicotinic receptors, it's like you can eat the tobacco, your body begins to process the nicotine, and through that, the connection with the trees open up. And during a tree diet, you're also drinking a tea made from the tree. So you're eating the tobacco and drinking the tea, and it's creating this alchemical mixture in the body as that's happening. If you're smoking tobacco, it can be very powerful to, say, smoke tobacco from a pipe and then blow that smoke onto a tree that you're connecting with, because the tree will absorb that tobacco, and that will open up channels of communication in a more full way. It's really fascinating how all that works. I don't fully understand it, but the deeper that I've gone into this work, the more that I'm able to feel that bio web of connection.
You know what I think is fascinating on a metaphorical front? Okay, so we have nicotine receptors naturally, so we're supposed to work with that plant. We have cannabinoid receptors naturally, so we're supposed to work with that plant. And yet we have DMT inhibitor, which is basically what ayahuasca does. It allows the DMT to reach our system, whereas normally we break it down. So what does that say? That we're not supposed to. I mean, it's a funny way to think about it.
Yeah, I don't think it's that we're not supposed to. Like, I've always thought about it like this, because even grass clippings contain DMT, so you could technically synthesize DMT from lawn clippings. And if we're eating plants and we didn't have the inhibitors in our guts, we would constantly be tripping on DMT,
Yeah.
which would not be conducive to anything happening
Yeah.
So it's like the body's intelligence knew that those states were meant for very specific purposes and put in the control. I don't know the word for it, but put the pieces in place so that we weren't constantly having a DMT trip.
Yeah.
Although this whole reality might just be one big DMT trip that
For
we're
all
all
we
doing.
know.
So
Truth.
yeah.
So for such a wise grandfather, incredible master plant, how how did it become such a ill-used commodity?
Yeah, because he's a very powerful plant. And and it's interesting to go back into this because in many ways tobacco was the original plant medicine of the Americas, both North and South America. It was used for many, many thousands of years as a way to offer prayer up to great spirits, used for healing purposes, cleansing the body, cleansing the energy, used for bringing together communities. In a lot of Native American traditions, there was a pipe for peace and a pipe for war. And so even when conflict was there, tobacco was used to bring about connection even in that setting. And so it's a very powerful plant that's been used with reverence for thousands of years. And when European colonizers came to the Americas, they didn't really have any idea about what it was. And so there's a lot of stigma, a lot of demonization of it. And then when they found out that they could make a lot of money from it, that became the sole focus, and it became just exploited to the nth degree because people could make massive profits off of it. And then not understanding the spirit of tobacco, one of the first ways that really blew up when it made its way to Europe was actually using it as a snuff, so very similar to Hapé. And people in Europe ate it up, or I guess snuffed it up, but like they became obsessed with it, but at the same time it was also looked down upon. And then smoking came about and all of these different forms of use came about. But it's a very powerful plant spirit, and so when it's not used with reverence and intention for the purposes of connection and prayer, then I would say that that's where the addictive or maybe the habitualized properties of it can come in. Very similar to how cannabis works,
And
where
and we will have an episode about cannabis.
yeah, I look forward to that one. But yeah, when tobacco's not approached for the purposes of prayer and healing, it can very quickly become just a crutch and a coping mechanism because of the way that it affects the human body physiologically, where it can bring a sense of calmness and grounding and presence, especially if there's a lot of anxiety or somebody's mind is racing and all these different things. It can be amazing for creativity, but it's ultimately there to help open up those channels within yourself. And so if it's not being used consciously in that way, then it can become a crutch that somebody becomes reliant upon to access those states. Yeah, and I would say that ultimately that's how the modern relationship with tobacco came about, is people just not understanding how to connect with it and use it in a way that respects the medicine that tobacco is, not using it in right relation, essentially. And then in the process of that, it's just been exploited by people looking to make a ton of money.
Now, do you think it's possible? I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just wondering, do you think it's possible that, I mean, these plants are so wise, so much wiser than we are. And the plant has infiltrated every layer of society that is not ceremonial. And there must be still some benefits, some of the plant medicine that is accidentally acquired. Is that just wishful thinking on my on my end?
No, I don't think so. I mean, what I just shared of people who are anxious or their minds are racing or they feel like they're in a creative rut, and they go and they smoke a cigarette, and all of a sudden they feel calmer, they feel more present, there's like a little surge in creativity. That is the medicine of tobacco working through. I think it's just that, I'll say it this way. When working with any plant in a shamanic way, or working with any plant, maintaining a right relationship with that plant, all the plant's doing is mirroring to you the places where you have blocked your own creative freedom, your own freedom of expression, or your freedom of embodiment. And so the plant is there to liberate those, to show you the places where you've blocked yourself so that you can bring liberation to those places.
Yourself.
And when people don't understand that, that's when they begin to rely on plants to bring that feeling of liberation.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was it like from before you worked with tobacco and now? I mean, because you're really involved in this study. How has it affected you? Yeah, what has changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to before I did that first oak diet with tobacco to now, my whole life looks completely different. I think what tobacco helped me to do was to recognize the places where I was trying to force something to happen in my life. And it brought all of that to a complete standstill so that I had no choice but to sit with the discomfort of, oh, I'm trying to force all of these pieces into place that maybe aren't meant to be put in place. And so it's been this big stripping away process of all of these things that I thought should be happening. And in that stripping away process has just brought me into a very deep trust and surrender for life of what's actually wanting to move through me and through my channel and what I'm actually here to bring forth. It's not been an easy journey by any means. It's been incredibly challenging at times, but the more that I have been able to surrender to that process and just trust in life and trust in tobacco and trust in what's being shown to me, the more ease has entered into my life as well. And so, yeah, it's been incredibly beautiful to just witness the shifts take place and how much more ease and flow there is in life. And the things that I was trying so hard to bring forth that never seemed to quite catch, I just let those things go. And what's coming in their place has been so much more easeful and so much more fulfilling. And
but it's different. It's not what you were trying to push.
No, it's different. And it's I would say it's different even in terms of like just the energy that it's being brought forth with. And so a lot of my work nowadays is working with people with the cannabis oil to help heal chronic disease and gut issues and things like that. And it's been very easeful. I feel like the energy is just flowing with that. And then other things in my life too, it just feels way more open and spacious. And in that spaciousness, what spirit is actually trying to bring through has the space to come through. Before, it's like I'm trying to contain everything and hold everything myself and carry it forward and all of that. And life's like, why are you tiring yourself out so much?
So when you say you sit, you mean when you work with the tobacco, you do the ceremony, you eat tobacco, and then you sit with it. Is that part of the practice?
Yeah, so part of the training that I've been doing, my teacher offers these 3-month tobacco diets, and they're integrated diets. So you're still going about your day-to-day life, but each night or each morning, depending on what you choose, you're consciously setting aside 30 minutes to an hour and connecting with the spirit of tobacco, and then eating a small amount of tobacco paste and swallowing it into the body. And it's being digested by the liver primarily. And so it's cleaning out the liver, working itself through the digestive tract. And so it's literally being digested through the body. And that begins to change things physiologically, because everything that we experience psycho-emotionally, we also are experiencing on a physical level. So as the tobacco goes in and begins to clear out things on the physical level, that's bringing up all the pieces in the other aspects of life as well, which give us the opportunity to meet whatever those pieces are that are being brought forth and actually heal them and clear them from the body.
Mm.
So in that way, tobacco is, again, a master at the subtlety, because 3 months of eating small amounts of tobacco is very, very subtle, to the point where sometimes you're like, is anything even happening? And then all of a sudden everything will shift at once and you'll be like, oh my God, I've look at all that's happened. But in the day to day, it can feel like nothing's happening. So it's really about slowing down and just being present with those tiny little micro adjustments of alignment that tobacco is constantly bringing forth.
So you would say if somebody wanted to work with tobacco and really get deep into that medicine, it would be more beneficial to do a small daily dose rather than another kind of master plant where you go into the Amazon, you take the ayahuasca, you meet the Mapacho, and that's the plant that you connect with. Or do you get different things out of it, or basically that one is just like a poof, and then this one is more integrative?
Yeah, I mean, you would get different things out of any way that you commune with a plant. If you're going into a shamanic container like a diet, the medicine, the container itself is structured in such a way that the medicine is going to flow much more potently and effectively. But you can still connect just solo if you have a pipe or like a pre-rolled mapacho or something like that, and you're just puffing on it. Um, I would say the biggest thing is just bringing your intention and your prayer and your presence to the process. You don't want to be smoking it mindlessly. Also with Mapacho, you don't want to be inhaling it. So you're just puffing it into the mouth and then letting the smoke go.
I have one. When Sydney first came back from Peru, she gifted me a whole bunch from Mapacho, and I use them, I save them for special occasion, for like when I really need that extra connection with tobacco,
Mm.
and I'm down to one, and so I've been hoarding it, like treasuring it, like I don't want to use it because I don't know if there is, it's that trust piece that will I get more? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also, that's a beautiful way to, not necessarily hoarding it, but a beautiful way to approach it is like, does what I'm about to do warrant the use of this sacred plant?
Yes.
And if the sacred use of tobacco would amplify and benefit whatever it is that you're about to do, then that's a beautiful way to amplify the power of the prayer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because it's a very strong medicine for sure. My teacher says smoking a pipe or smoking mapacho is similar to a loaded gun, and
In what way?
whatever your prayer is where the bullet's going, and you smoking is pulling the trigger of the gun. I believe that was given to him by his teacher, Iron Eagle, who I think was a Lakota shaman. But that's always stuck with me of like, this is a very powerful tool when you choose to smoke tobacco. And so whatever your prayer is, it's going to be amplified. That arrow is going to be shot in that direction very clearly. So approach it with reverence and respect and
Interesting.
intentionality.
Yeah, I've noticed I tend to turn to Mapacho when I need protection. Like if I'm
Mm,
feeling unsafe, if the compass is spinning, and then I'll sit with Mapacho, or like living in the jungle. I had a crazy episode of lice that went on for 2.5 months, and yeah, in the end I turned to Mapacho, and I puffed one. I used one of them, and I would blow the smoke into my dreads, and that actually helped.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, energetically it just cleansed something for sure.
yeah. And it's tobacco is also there's a lot of indigenous people who use it in that way, where they'll either put a ring of tobacco around a ceremony space to keep snakes or scorpions and things like that out, or it's very cleansing. So that's why you'll see shamans blowing smoke on people, because it's cleansing the physical and the energetic body. So the ways in which tobacco functions is multidimensional, to the point where I don't know if anybody truly understands it. It's just about, just about listening.
So once you are a tabaquero, what can you do?
um, I don't quite know how to answer that question. I essentially, once I'm given an altar, it's a blessing to be able to serve tobacco in a ceremonial way. What I will do with it at that point, I don't know yet. And so,
You were just called to study it, but you have not
yeah,
been yet told why.
I have inklings as to why, like maybe ideas and things like that have come through, but I am just gonna continue on the path and just continue to follow the calling of the plants and of spirit and see where it leads me. Not really holding on to any vision of this is how it has to look or this is how it has to be.
You were just taught that that doesn't work.
Yeah, tobacco has shown me that that doesn't work many times.
Full circle.
Yeah. So it's really just about listening, and how does the plant want to work through me when it's time for me to work with the plant in that way.
Yeah. So let's say somebody is a smoker, just regular Virginia tobacco. How can they bring more ceremony? Maybe they don't want to quit their relationship with tobacco, but how can they turn it just even a little bit into something more ceremony, more right relation? You talked about right relation. If you can speak a little bit about what is right relation and how do we get into it?
Yeah, that's a very deep question. I would say if somebody's smoking cigarettes and they're wanting to connect more with the essence of tobacco or the spirit of tobacco, to switch to another modality, maybe smoking a pipe instead of a cigarette, because the cigarettes are loaded with additives and all sorts of junk. A pipe requires a bit more preparation and care and consciousness being brought to it. So that could be a fairly easeful way to transition to a more mindful use of tobacco. If they did want to keep smoking cigarettes, which I don't recommend to anybody, just bringing more mindfulness to the process, I don't see that as being a negative. But if they are wanting to go deeper into working with tobacco and coming into right relationship with the spirit, I would say that working with tobacco shamanically would be the way that you would begin to heal that relationship and come back into balance with it.
And that would be just really taking the time to get to know the plant itself through daily ritual or...
Yeah. I mean, I would say working with a plant shamanically, you would want a shaman or a facilitator to be there to facilitate that container. And then working with it in a shamanic way, the energy is completely different. It's very difficult to actually use the plant improperly because the spirit of the plant is so present in the space that it'll show you very quickly if you're using it without intentionality and reverence. And so you're given a very potent opportunity to come into that balance with the plant.
And I imagine we should do that with all the plants.
Yeah, I mean, staying in right relation, it's kind of a way of being in the world. I know that in North America, the Indigenous call it the beauty way, walking the beauty way. And it's about walking with respect and reverence for all forms of life and not overusing or abusing or disrespecting any forms of life, but to actually use what's needed, give back when possible, and maintain that balance so that life can continue to thrive in abundance.
Thank you. Yeah, the beauty way. I used to live in Sedona. I was well steeped in that concept. It's such a way of life. Is it beauty, beauty before you, beauty behind, beauty above, beauty below, beauty inside?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, thank you for bringing this. So, we just have a few minutes. So let's say people would like to work with you, not specifically with tobacco, but you have retreats, you help people heal with cannabis, and you want to say a little bit about your offerings and how people can connect with you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can speak a bit about the cannabis oil. So with the cannabis oil, I'm mainly working with people who have chronic disease or chronic gut issues. And the cannabis oil is amazing at just helping to bring the body back into balance and find that deep healing, especially for conditions where allopathic medicine really has no answers. And it's such a potent and powerful medicine for bringing that deep sense of healing. So that's mainly how I work with the cannabis oil. If anybody wants to work with me there, you can reach out to me. Find me on Instagram at the Greg Moran, Greg Moran, or reach out to me there. And those are typically 3 to 6 month containers, depending on how much time somebody has to devote towards the cannabis oil. If they want to do the full on treatment, which is what I did when I was healing, it's eating it 3 times a day for the full 3-month period. If you don't have that time, say you have work and other obligations and things like that, and you can maybe only take it once or twice a day, then that would be the 6-month container. But that's something that I speak with in depth before working with anybody, and we come up with the whole game plan and everything like that. So if anybody's interested in working with me with the cannabis oil, they can find me on Instagram and connect with me there. And
You said you're going on tour with your partner as well, right?
yeah, so we're looking at probably the fall here in the Northern Hemisphere of doing these tours through the U.S., going to states where cannabis is legal and having make your own medicine workshops, which are 1 to 3 day workshops where we're essentially teaching people how to make their own cannabis oil so that they can heal themselves with the oil, because ultimately the knowledge to heal yourself is the ultimate knowledge to be able to possess, and incredibly empowering, especially if you're deep in a healing journey with chronic illness. And so that feels like one of the cleanest ways to be able to share this medicine in a way to just help the most people we can. So we're looking at sometime in the fall, so keep an eye out for the dates. We would ideally like to do a West Coast tour and then an East Coast tour. And yeah, I'm really excited about the Make Your Own Medicine workshops. I feel like they're going to be a really beautiful way to bring together communities in all the different areas. And just it's beautiful making the cannabis oil medicine. So
Very
able to
nice.
share that with others feels
Very
like
nice.
a gift.
Yeah, I'll put your info, down below, up there, everywhere. All the places.
Yeah.
Wow. Greg, thank you so much. Do you have more?
Yeah, I have one more piece that I'll
Tell me
share.
more. Tell me more.
If anybody is wanting to connect with Mapacho and work with tobacco in the shamanic way, I'm not yet serving tobacco in that way, but my teacher is having some tree diets taking place in Somerset in the UK in August. And it's going to be a super, super beautiful, potent container. These diets are incredibly healing and life-changing for so many people, myself included. And if anybody is wanting to work with tobacco in that way, either doing those tree diets with my teacher Jordan Mockingbird or the 3-month tobacco diets, I would say would be the way to go to really deepen into the reverence and the true medicine of tobacco.
Yeah.
So,
And if anybody
yeah.
is curious, you can scroll through episode 4, season 1. I had Sophie on, and she talked about
Yeah.
her oak diet with Jordan Mockingbird and the way it changed her life. I mean, literally drastic changes. So,
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that Sophie was on a podcast with you. Yeah, she was at the Oak Diet in Ojai, California last May. And yeah, just a beautiful to be able to witness her in the space. I was supporting that diet. And yeah, these diets, they really are life-changing for so many people. So if anybody is wanting to dive deep into plant medicine and tobacco medicine, those diets are a great way to get into this work.
thank you so much. Yeah. And I would imagine we will see you again because I want to know more about your cannabis journey, but my heart was set on tobacco, and I thank you
Mm.
for coming on the Wild Ways to speak about it. So, yeah, and thanks everybody for tuning in and learning something new and cool. You can leave a comment if there is another plant you would like to learn about, then I will find somebody or leave a like or subscribe or all the things. And thank you so much. Until next time, and ciao.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you,
Such
Greg.
an honor to be able to speak about these medicines and share them with people. And yeah, I look forward to our next episode with cannabis.
I hope
Hmm.
that's it. Bloop.